What's up, guys? It is Sam here, and today we're going to look at factor number 5 in our power rankings. And I'll talk a little bit about our power rankings, what that is, if you're new here, as well as I've put together 4 charts here to take a look at what we're going to be analyzing here. If you look at the title, we're going to take a look at Twitter. And we put together 4 charts for you. The first is the total number of tweets per month or over the past 30 days. And I think this, in essence, over time, represents the amount of work that is getting put into these platforms. And we will assume that at this point, nobody is using any software in terms of bots to increase their likes, their comments, their followers, and they're not buying followers too. So that's going to be the first one we're going to take a look at because I think it represents the amount of work involved on the platform over time. The next one we're going to take a look at is the absolute number of followers gained over the past 2 weeks. And I picked the past 2 weeks because I think that's the most relevant data of what's happening, right? Over the past 2 weeks, that kind of shows what's actually going on. And then the last thing that I wanted to touch on is the growth rate in followers. And the reason that we're making a little bit of a distinction relative to our Facebook ranking, by the way, if you want to check out the Facebook ranking, go back to the channel and watch that. Tons of good stuff in that video, and you get the entire Facebook ranking there. And that is number 4 in terms of the factors in our power rankings. And the last chart, and we use those 2 metrics, the growth rate as well as the absolute number of followers, because they're both valuable, but one doesn't give us all the information. The growth rate allows us to compare channels of different sizes in terms of their Twitter account, but it still doesn't give any value to, even if something has half as much of a growth rate, but they have a shitload more followers. Like if I have 10 million followers and you have 100 million followers, and I grow at 10%, I get 1 million followers, but you grow at 5% and you get 500,000 followers. I think that the amount of followers is also very relevant, even if the growth rate is down. So I wanted to capture that. And so what we did is take the average between these, the growth rate, the total number of followers, as well as the total output. Now, what are we talking about? This is the Democratic National Committee, or the Democratic national candidates for nomination to run for president. So we took all 10 candidates who are going to be in the, currently, as we know, in the September 12th debate. So we took all those candidates and we looked at their Twitter to get this. Well, we looked at Social Blade, which pulls data from Twitter to get this information. And with that being said, if this is your first time here, what's up? My name is Sam, and if you're returning, it's good to freaking see you. Alright, now, with that being said, let's give you a little bit of context so you know what these power rankings are. As I mentioned earlier, the power rankings in mine, right, because we hear these from like Fox or CNN or these other media conglomerates or legacy players in the media world. And theirs is generally based off of some like expert's opinion about what is going on, and they will draw that from like their experiences as well as they'll use polling data. And polling data is the other way that it is power rankings are created. However, where we're a little bit different is we're going to take a look at the actual data. So you might think that the actual data would be polling, and that is good data, but when you have the volume of data that we look at versus, say, 1,000 people that take a poll, or 500 people that take a poll, or 2,000 people that take a poll, versus 6 million or 10 million data points. I think the one has a lot more validity in terms of how relevant it is versus the other one. So that is what the Google search means. So we took a look at the Google search volume. And by the way, you can check out the channel for all of these. And also the other ones that we're about to mention, press that subscribe button so you can look at those videos as well. But first we looked at the Google search volume. So what you do is you take Andrew Yang and you search on Google Trends for that. And that gives us the amount of search volume for the term Andrew Yang. And we looked at the 12-month mark, the 3-month mark, and the 90-day. And then we took an average of that, with giving a little bit more relevance to the most recent data, because I think that tells a better story of what's actually happening at that moment. Then we did the same thing for YouTube at the 12, the 3, and the 1-month marks. And then we took a look at Alexa.com. Now, Alexa.com ranks websites globally, and then you can narrow down by country. So what we did is we took each one of these candidates that's in this primary, and we took their websites. And then we put them on Alexa to do this analysis, to get the data on their the ranking on these. And this is one of the things that Alexa does, is it tracks us. And those of you who do not know, Alexa is different than the Alexa from Amazon. However, Alexa.com is also owned by Amazon. Interesting fact there. So we looked at their U.S. ranking out of all sites in the U.S. Where did they rank? And two other factors: the total number of page views per visit and the amount of time that somebody spends on a site on average. And then we came up with a ranking for each one of these three categories, and then took a weighted average of that to come up with our overall website ranking for the candidates running for president for the Democratic Party. And then yesterday we took a look at the Facebook following. Similarly, we're going to look at the Twitter and YouTube channel growth, as well as a couple other factors that are going to be a little bit different for each one of these. Now, the last one over here, we're going to look at donations. And we're going to take a look at the percentage of small donations, meaning the people who donate less than $200, and who has the highest percentage of donors who are donating, who are small donors, which would mean, in the way I'm looking at this, if they have a higher percentage of small donors donating to their campaign, that's a little bit more relevant, in my opinion, than 10 companies or 10 lobbyists giving several $100s at a time. I don't know, just more relevant to me. There's more people involved. Just like the polls versus like what we're doing. So, with that being said, let's get into the video. We're going to take a look at the first chart, which is the number of tweets per candidate. So I put together this little chart here. As you can see, there's one that stands way out by itself, and that's Andrew Yang. So this is over the past 30 days. I don't have this data tracked. Let's take a look here. Let's see if we can pull up his thing real quick and see if we can see it over time. The following tweets. So you can see the tweets are just up and to the right at a decent enough slope. So he's putting in the work consistently. And it's paying off, which we're going to get into in a minute. Number 2 for the number of tweets over the past 3 days is Bernie Sanders. Also, Bernie Sanders has a very big social following online. Beto O'Rourke and Julian wrap out the top here. So we've got, let's see, 740 tweets, 500, 390, 290, and 266. So that wraps out the top 4 for the total number of tweets here. Next, we're going to jump up here, and we're going to take a look at the total number of followers. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to take a look at the total number of followers, not just the growth rate, even though we can't necessarily compare these, because somebody like Beto O'Rourke or Julian Castro or Andrew Yang or Amy Kuchbacher, or whatever her name is, their base is relatively small. So somebody like Bernie Sanders, who has almost 10 million people, maybe he's only growing at 100,000 new followers every month, and his growth rate's like, say, 1%. Versus somebody else who's growing at 2%, but their base is way, way, way smaller, and their absolute number of followers that they're gaining is, say, 20,000. So on the one hand, somebody's gaining 100,000 followers, but their growth rate is only 2% or 1%, versus somebody else who's gaining at 2%, but the total number of followers they need to get to 2% is only 20,000. So the absolute number is definitely important. I think it gives us some relevant information, and that's why I wanted to include that in the Twitter ranking here, because on the Facebook I did not, I think it was on Facebook, I did not include it, so I wanted to make sure to include it here because I do think it is relevant. And this is, if you take a look at this, we have Bernie Sanders here, who has gained, and this is just in the last 2 weeks, so Bernie Sanders is fucking slaying it. He's gained 53,000 new followers in the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks, that's tremendous. Next, in second place, was Andrew Yang with 43,000 followers. And then it looks like Elizabeth Warren followed up by Kamala Harris. Similarly, it was the same over here, except for Elizabeth Warren doesn't tweet a lot. What was her tweets down here? 78 tweets. So I don't have a reference point for this other than I believe think about this, if you have your Instagram and you're posting 4 times a day versus me posting, say, once every other day, I feel like you're going to grow at a much faster rate, right? Because you're posting 4 times a day. Like Andrew Yang is posting 737 over the past 30 days, where Elizabeth Warren posted 78. So 10x, 10 times more almost than Elizabeth Warren. So you would expect him to grow at a faster rate, which when we look at the total number of followers, it's evident here. And there's clearly some type of other factors that are not necessarily captured when because we want to look at explanatory variables. So this appears to explain some of the growth, but clearly there are other factors involved here because she is growing in spite of having virtually no output in terms of the creative that she's putting on Twitter. We didn't actually look at that. So next we're going to look at the growth rate, and we're going to touch on the absolute number of followers for each one of these people. Cory Booker pulls up the bottom with a 0.14% growth. A lot of the players here are pretty much all like between 1.3 down to 0.14 for 8 of the people, except for Julian Castro and Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang, over the last 2 weeks, his growth rate was 6%. That's astonishingly quick for a growth rate. If you annualize the growth rate, because right now it's on a bi-weekly basis, if you annualize that, that's a fucking crazy growth rate. And Julian's number 2 here, Beto O'Rourke is number 4, and Pete is number 3. But we look at Pete, it looks like he's got a bunch of activity on Google and other places, so I was almost expecting Pete to be doing really well. I feel like he's got hired somebody good, or is just putting a little bit more thought into the strategy, which he's doing from a digital standpoint. The last thing that we're going to do is take a look at all of these wrapped into one. And that is what we have here, where the lower the number, the better. And why is that? So we've got the Twitter ranking right here, and we're going to go right here, look at Pete. So what this is the 9th, his 9th ranking. He doesn't tweet very often. He gained 17,000 new followers. Still amazing, 17,000, almost 18,000 followers, but that was 7th overall. And the growth rate in his base, in is over the past 2 weeks is 1.28%. 1.28% is still really, really great for a growth rate over 2%. And he's already got almost 1.4 million followers. So he's got a decent. He's got a decent. Man, my contacts are ridiculous. It's currently almost 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, I need to get this video filmed before I go to bed. And I've had my contacts in for, I think, since basically 7 o'clock this morning. So, whatever, 12 plus 4 or 5 hours. Yeah, so my eyes are super fucking dry. Anyways, okay, so we take the total of those, and we divide it by 3 because there's 3 categories. That's the average. Here's the average for everybody up here. Andrew Yang is #1 overall on Twitter, followed up by the next closest person, and that is, if you look over here, let's just look at this chart, Bernie Sanders at #2. And his overall ranking was 3.67. But you see there's a big difference between these two. Even though we have Bernie Sanders coming in second in terms of total amount of volume of output, the total number of gains, he's #1. He was #2 in output, #1 in absolute gains, and #8 in terms of growth rate, which is interesting because we're trying to, what the power ranking is trying to do is understand the relevance in America, not based on polling data, not based on some expert's opinion. The most unbiased data is what we're going to try to look at every single time. And that's why, as we mentioned earlier, some of this are explain part of the answer of the relevance, right? Clearly, you can see there's something going on when somebody has a growth rate that is like almost 3x what anybody else's is. Of the next closest person. The next closest person is like double everybody else. So he's pretty, there's something going on there. It is definitely some type of valuable story to tell and to follow over time, and that's what we're doing. But there's other variables, and that is why this is just one of 7 different factors that we're using to come up with our power ranking. Remember, we've got the Google search volume, the YouTube search volume, the ranking of their websites, the Facebook ranking, the Twitter ranking, the YouTube ranking, and the donations, the money portion of it. So over the next couple of days, we're going to finish tying all these pieces together to really get a picture of what's going on, and then we're going to take a look at that relative to the polls that are out there. And we're going to track it over time. So if you want to follow along with that journey, make sure you press that subscribe button and that little bell notification so YouTube can notify you every time I post a video. I would love to hear your thoughts. I really do appreciate anybody who's left some nice, thoughtful comments and feedback for me. They've been super helpful, and I do read 97% of the comments as well as personally respond to them. So thank you for anybody who has left a comment. If you guys have any thoughts, leave them down below. If you guys want to jump over to Instagram because you don't want to leave a comment below, link is in the description. Jump over to Instagram and say what's up, shoot me a DM or something, like a couple photos. I put a lot more fitness related stuff out on Instagram. So appreciate you guys, and now let me figure out how to stop this.